Hello everyone, it's me an INFP and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about a rather serious subject, INFPs and abuse.
Learning all the magic that we can.
So I have been following the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial. I wasn't following it from the start, but about halfway through I started watching it and got caught up. And it is quite a trial. If you are not familiar with it, Amber Heard is Johnny Depp's ex-wife, and she wrote an article insinuating that he was abusive towards her. Because of that, Johnny Depp lost his reputation as well as several movie roles, and he is suing her for $50 million. And she decided to countersue him for $100 million. So they're going through a very dramatic court trial right now. Abuse has kind of been on my mind, mostly because of this trial, but other things as well. While watching Johnny Depp in this trial, the question popped into my head of, are INFPs prone to abusive or toxic relationships? And why? So I'm going to explore that a little bit today. Just to clarify things, I am on Johnny Depp's side in the fact that I believe Amber Heard was abusive towards him, so I am exploring the relationship of INFPs and abusive relationships. INFPs, such as Johnny Depp. I believe Johnny Depp is an INFP. He's one of the more well-known INFPs, and he is also a 4-wing 5 Enneagram, which is also my Enneagram. So I kind of see that come out in his personality. He seems very sincere, and you can see that he's chosen a lot of like quirky roles in his films, and I think that coincides well with the INFP 4-wing 5. So one of the first things I'm going to talk about is the connection between Johnny Depp's family background and his childhood, and why that influenced him to end up in a marriage with someone like Amber Heard, and why he stayed in a marriage with her even after he knew she was abusive. Both of Johnny Depp's parents seem to have been abusive towards him. He doesn't mention his dad as much, but he mentioned that his dad was physically abusive towards him, as well as his mom. What I find interesting is that he kind of has two different kind of beliefs about his mom. On the one hand, he lists her positive qualities, like she's funny, smart. He says she's one of his best friends. And he seems close to her, and he was very upset when she passed away. I believe he got a tattoo related to her after she died. But on the other hand, he says she was one of the meanest people he's ever met. And, you know, she would hit him, she was abusive towards him. And so it's interesting how he has these two beliefs coinciding with his mom of like, yes, I'm close to her, she's my best friend, but also she's one of the meanest people I've ever met and she's been mean to me. So it's like, I kind of relate to having kind of like dual beliefs about people because of my attachment style. Now, I haven't looked into what Johnny Depp's attachment style is, but my attachment style is fearful avoidant, and I find it interesting how Johnny Depp has these conflicting beliefs about his mom. It's kind of like, on the one hand, yes, I care about this person, I feel close to them, but on the other hand, they're mean to me and they're abusive. And it's like, how do those fit together? And in Johnny Depp's case, and in many other INFPs relationships, I believe abuse was normalized for him. That's something he grew up with for both his parents, including his mom, who he seemed closer to, and it's just what he's familiar with. And that is something else I want to emphasize, is that why do INFPs end up with people who are abusive? especially if they came from families of abuse or backgrounds of abuse. Like I mentioned in one of my previous videos about attachment styles, we tend to be drawn to what is familiar to us, even if it is toxic and abusive. And especially once trauma gets mixed up in there. I will talk about trauma bonds a little bit later in this video, and it will explain why INFPs can be drawn to people who have familiar trauma to them, trauma from their past, and then why it makes it hard for them to leave. So Johnny Depp's parents divorced when he was around 15, and that was very traumatic for him. And that is when he started using drugs and alcohol. And I think just knowing all of this makes so much sense in what we're seeing now in the trials, just by kind of linking them together. He started getting involved with drugs and alcohol as a way to cope with the stress and trauma he was under with his parents' divorce, especially because his mom was taking it hard. And it seems like he kind of was by her side during this, trying to support her. And she overdosed on pills and tried to unalive herself, and that was very traumatic for Johnny to experience. And a lot of responsibility was put on him as a young age, like his father telling him like he was the man of the house now, like when he left. So it was his responsibility to take care of his mom, even when she was taking it hard. Her life was at stake, and he was trying to be responsible for all of that. And you see this connected in his relationship with Amber Heard, and that she also threatened multiple times to unalive herself. And I'm just using this word, I guess, to be more tactful, and I'm sure, like, you know what I mean. Yes, you can see similar patterns between Heard and his mom. And Amber Heard has been diagnosed by Dr. Curry, a forensic psychologist in the trial, with borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder. And the borderline was not a surprise to me. I kind of sensed that even before she was diagnosed with that. I mean, I have no reason to believe why they would not be a correct diagnosis. And I think it makes a lot of sense in their dynamics. I do want to point out that obviously not all people with borderline are abusive, but in this case she is. So yes, Heard threatened to unalive herself if Johnny left her. And that is a threat that unhealthy people make sometimes when someone wants to leave the relationship. And if someone does that, to me, it's always a sign. That's a red flag. Someone's really unhealthy if they're using that as a threat. And because she has borderline, she has a deep fear of abandonment. Even though she's very ridiculing, criticizing, physically and emotionally abusive towards him, she still doesn't want to be left by him. Now, I'm just assuming, I don't know if this is a fact, but I believe that his drug and alcohol usage got worse when he was in a relationship with Heard. And you can see back when he was a teenager, he did it to numb himself from the trauma and stress he was going through with his parents' relationship and his mom's struggles. So we can see him doing this again while he is stuck in a relationship with Amber Heard, and him being stressed by her, not being able to be left alone, like not being able to like de-escalate after arguments, being stuck in a conflicting a relationship full of conflict. So to sum that up, we end up in dynamics that are familiar to us. And when it comes to INFPs and abuse as children, many INFPs have had abusive childhoods. But so have other types. That's not something exclusive to INFPs. but what can happen is how they react to that abuse. Yelling and strict punishments are especially damaging to young INFPs, and especially since many INFPs are highly sensitive people, anything that happens to them in childhood can have a deep impact, positive or negative, but especially the negative. So, why do INFPs end up in abusive relationships and why do they stay in them? First of all, trauma is blind. It just is. It keeps you stuck, it keeps you from seeing people's flaws. INFPs have personality traits that can be easily exploited by people. We see the best in everyone, or we want to. We want to believe that people mean what they're saying, that if they say they love us, that, true love exists, that, everyone is being genuine all the time, that even if people are damaged, they can be healed, they can be fixed. That's a big thing with INFPs, and not quite like, I think we do have a little bit of like innocence and naivety about us that people can either use or teach us hard lessons that not everyone is genuine and kind, and eventually we become jaded because of bad experiences with people. We wanted to see the best in them, and we trusted people we shouldn't have. And when Johnny, in the trial, asks why he stayed with Amber Heard after she was abusive, he says that, I stayed, I suppose, because my father stayed. I suppose because I had been in that relationship with Vanessa that was lost. Vanessa was his ex-girlfriend. I didn't want to fail. I wanted to try to make it work. And he says, I thought maybe I could help her. I thought maybe I could bring her around. As for the unaliveness I mentioned, he says, I remember very well that when my father left and my mother, Betty Sue, first attempted suicide that I woke up to, and that visual in my head, that was a direct result of my father's leaving. Miss Heard had spoken of suicide on a couple of occasions, so that also became a factor. That's something that always lives in the back of your brain and that you fear. So obviously he had a real fear of both leaving because of his past experiences of his parents, his father leaving, about that being something really bad, leading to really bad results, as well as the fear of Heard committing suicide when his mom tried the same thing, and I can totally understand why he would be in fear of that if she was threatening that to him. Another one of the things that make INFPs prone to being and staying in abusive relationships is that INFPs are highly self-critical of themselves. I know for myself, it's easy for me to take on blame that's not mine, to feel guilty for things that happened in a relationship that may not be something I should feel guilty for. I think it's easy for INFPs to doubt themselves, especially if someone else is constantly criticizing them and putting them down. INFPs often suffer from low self-esteem. I'm not sure about Johnny Depp's case, but he seems like he's very humble. He mentioned that he doesn't like to watch his own movies, like he doesn't want to watch himself in movies. So I think that speaks for humbleness at the very least, if not something more. People who are highly self-critical are vulnerable to criticism from other people, to being gaslit, being believed bad things about themselves, as well as taking the blame in the relationship. Another thing that INFPs should be aware of is we can be in love with the idea of love, and INFPs can idealize relationships, and when it's not matching up to what it seemed like it would be, they may try to get that back, or they may be in denial. Like I said before, and in Johnny's case, he thought she would get better. He thought, she would heal, or she would be like she was when they first met, which obviously was a facade. That's something that happens a lot where people in the beginning of a relationship put on a mask or they love bomb, which is also a narcissist trait. They're not who they really are in the beginning, which is why I don't recommend like rushing into a relationship or marriage before a certain date. Like it takes, I would say, 12 months, like around a year, to really know someone, if not longer than that. And I believe in Johnny and Herd's case, it was more of a quick thing. They got married really quickly. And that's always a risk because that person might not be who they seem at first. Another reason why INFPs can end up in abusive relationships and stay in them is a lack of boundaries. This is big, especially if you end up with an abusive person. Lack of boundaries makes it really hard to kind of say no, stand up for yourself. It seems like in Johnny's case, his reaction was flight. He would try to get away from the situation, to leave the room, and she didn't really want that to happen, and that was troublesome for them. But sometimes INFPs who have poor boundaries, like they have trouble getting out of situations they don't want to be in, or standing up for themselves. And something that kind of coincides with this is that INFPs can be people pleasers. People pleasing is a hard one because, if you're afraid of conflict, if conflict makes you uncomfortable, if you have beliefs of like you don't want to upset other people, you want them to like you, you don't want to rock the boat, people pleasing kind of prolongs any kind of abusive behavior because, people pleasing is not standing up for yourself and setting boundaries and being like, hey, this isn't okay. It's okay, well, maybe if I do this, they won't react this way. Maybe they won't get angry if I do everything right, if I please them, etc., etc. And that's something that INFPs can struggle with. Another big one that INFPs struggle with in ending up in abusive relationships and staying in them is that we tend to be very sensitive and very empathetic. I know for sure it's in my case and Johnny's case that like we would rather hurt ourselves than hurt other people. And I think this goes for INFPs in general. We tend to implode rather than explode. So we will take everything internally and we will just be torturing ourselves and hurting ourselves rather than taking that out on other people. And this can be hard in an abusive relationship because, we're so sensitive, we take everything to heart, but we also may be able to see someone else's side of the story as well. So we may give them some either benefit of the doubt or some grace and be like, well, you know what, it might be hard on them for these reasons, or I know their childhood was bad too, or whatever. I don't think we tend to be necessarily abusive back if we can help it. Like I said, we tend to hurt ourselves way more than we hurt other people. My last point is a big reason of why INFPs stay in abusive relationships is something called a trauma bond. Now, a trauma bond is defined as a deep emotional attachment that develops in a relationship characterized by abuse. That's emotional, physical, or both. And this develops out of a repeated cycle of abuse, devaluation, and positive reinforcement. The trauma of abuse might create powerful feelings you struggle to make sense of, especially when abuse alternates with kindness and intimacy. So this is something that I was talking about before with Johnny's mom, of how she had some kindness, intimacy, they were close, but also there was abuse. And this intermittent pattern is what creates a trauma bond. The abuse but sometimes they're nice, and then this might lead to like either kind of defending them or being unsure. It's like, well, they didn't know what they were doing. They were well intentioned. They're not like that all the time. They're nice to me sometimes. And this makes it hard to leave a trauma bond. Trauma bonds can be hard to break. And that is a big reason of why INFPs stay in abusive relationships instead of getting out of them. And it wasn't until about 2 or so years ago that I realized I myself had suffered abuse in certain ways. And I had to realize that and accept that. And that was rough. I didn't really realize that what I was going through was abuse and wasn't okay until I don't know, like I realized that some things weren't normal because like I said, trauma and abuse can be normalized, and that's if it's what you're used to, you may not see it as clearly as someone outside of your situation. Like I said before, I'm a fearful avoidant attachment style, which is usually born out of severe perceived trauma. I'm also a highly sensitive person, and like I said, anything that happened to me was heightened and I took to heart. So, in being a fearful avoidant, I have both an anxious and an avoidant side. And ironically, I believe my avoidant side actually protected me from potentially abusive relationships before they got too far. For example, there was a guy who had narcissistic tendencies that I had a short acquaintance with. He started out by love bombing me, and I thought it was kind of cute and funny, and I didn't really take it seriously, but we kind of somehow ended up in kind of like a mock relationship. Like, it was kind of like, I don't know, like I tend to end up in between undefined relationships, and that's something that I want to get out of because it's not great. Yeah, so we kind of ended up in this mock relationship thing, and I noticed some other traits he had, like pretending to have the same traits of me and like the same things I liked. I told him about a story I was writing and the topic I was writing the story on. It was a fictional story. And he was like, "Oh, no way, I'm writing the exact same kind of story." And I was like, "Really?" Because, like, that doesn't seem at all the kind of story he would actually write if he was actually into writing. And, like, I kind of knew he was lying, but I didn't say anything. And I'm just like, okay, I'm just gonna pretend like it's fine. Then he got mad at me for not responding quickly enough to him. I was going to community college part-time at the time, and I was taking a timed math test. And when I got out of it, I had a message with him, like yelling at me for not responding to him quickly enough. And I was like, bro, I was taking a math test. Like, I can't just respond to you in the middle of my math test. But he got mad, and then he gave me the silent treatment for a couple days as like punishment. And it was awkward because we were in a group chat together, so he was just kind of ignoring me on the group chat as well. And I was like, okay, I'm not sure what's going on. And after a couple of days of this, I was like, okay, whatever, dude. And someone asked me about our relationship or something. I was like, we're no longer together. And it was in like a group we were all in. And he saw it, and he got mad, and he chewed me out because I had said that without talking to him. Because as far as he concerned, that wasn't the case. But I was like, well, you gave me the silent treatment, like you weren't talking to me, so I just assumed it was over. But then I wanted to stay friends with him for whatever reason, because I get attached to people that I get to know, and then I develop connections with. And I was like, please, can we just stay friends? And he was like, no, no, no. And he refused. So I'm like, well, fine. And so after that, he decided to try to trash my reputation by spreading false rumors about me to everyone in the group. that we were in, and he kind of, was saying all these negative things about me, spreading these false rumors, trying to damage my reputation, and I full out called him a narcissist. Like, the actual narcissistic personality disorder is pretty rare, so, like, I'm not saying he had that. I don't think he did. Like, I think he had narcissistic traits, for sure, but I just, like, full out, I'm just like, you're a narcissist, bro. And he denied it. He's like, no, I'm not. But I blocked him, and that was that. But it was my avoidance side that was like, after the silent treatment, I'm like, well, okay. If I didn't have an avoidance side, it might have gone a different way. I'm not saying it will keep me out of abusive relationships, but if they're showing a lot of abusive behavior, eventually I'll catch on, and I'll get out of that. I'm not gonna stay in it for too long. I mean, there was another instance where I didn't really realize that it was abusive, that it was not okay, and it took me a while to catch on to that. Kind of too late because the relationship was pretty much over by the time I realized it. But, like, I think every relationship I've had has been a lesson. I learn more of, like, what's not okay, what I'm looking for, what I'm not looking for, what I'm not going to put up with in the future. And I'm not saying that I was, like, perfectly healthy at the time either, because, like, I haven't been the healthiest in the past. I have had red flags myself. I wouldn't say being abusive, but not being a healthy person in some ways. Yeah, like, I don't really talk about this, but yeah, something that has come to light for me is a pattern of people not respecting my boundaries. Partly because I have a hard time putting them up, because some abusive relationships can lead to codependency. For example, pretty much all my experiences with guys have been them not respecting my physical boundaries. Like, my first kiss was non-consensual. And I was only, like, a kid, obviously. Like, I was 13 or 14, 13, 12, something like that. And our neighborhood friend decided he liked me for exactly one day. And he chased me around the yard trying to kiss me, and I was trying to get away from him. He backed me up against our screen back door, while I was trying to get in it and go inside, and he kissed me. And then he immediately lost interest afterwards. And I guess you can see how that would be a damaging experience to have, a first experience with guys, like, for that to happen. And afterwards, I washed my lips off with soap because I was like, ew. Because, like, I didn't want to be kissed. And I think that was clear, but that seemed to be a pattern of, guys not respecting my boundaries. And that's something that I don't want to put up with in the future. And I believe that is a form of abuse. That's like sexual assault, technically. And I would say sexual assault is defined as someone touching you in a sexual way when you make it clear you don't want to be touched. Another thing I want to touch on is the gender differences, INFPs in gender and abuse and gender. So yeah, I want to make it clear that this trial between Depp and Heard has had some connotations in gender, some differences in how they're treated compared to, what is perceived of them. For example, like, Depp, when Heard kind of insinuated that he was abusive, and they went to trial, and somehow she won without evidence, really, because there hasn't been any evidence in this trial as far as I'm concerned. But it was basically all on hearsay, her lawyer's favorite word. People immediately thought of him in a negative way, with little to no proof. It was hearsay that he was abusive, But I remember people's opinions of him immediately plummeting and people like hating his guts and being like, oh, he's a wife beater. I hate him. I'm never watching another movie he's in again. And they just immediately, like, with no, you know, just by her word, just immediately thinking the worst of him. I remember someone asking me what I thought of it at the time, and I said that, we don't know the whole story. This doesn't seem like something he would do. So like I'm not sure I believe that he was abusive. That just doesn't seem like something he'd do, and we don't know what the story is. And I never really believed he did it. And I still don't. And I'm glad that this trial is coming out and showing more of the side of things of what's really going on. That his reputation will be more restored because this trial is being live recorded and put out for everyone to watch. And as for gender, it's also been noticed that there seems to be a lot of evidence against her, but she didn't get dropped from her movies. She still hasn't been convicted of anything. Like, she seems to need a lot more proof to be proven as an abuser compared to him, where people immediately believed he was. And he lost movie roles, they immediately dropped him. So that's been kind of a gender difference in abuse, that women have typically in the past been more prevalent in being abused, but males being abused definitely exist. And I think this trial is good to show that yes, men can be abused too, and they should still be advocated for. And I don't really believe gender matters with abuse. Humans abuse each other. It doesn't matter what gender you are. And I am for women empowerment, but I also am for justice. And in this case, I believe she is guilty, and I believe his reputation should be cleared. And I think she should be held responsible for the abuse she has done towards him. With male INFPs, I think it can be hard for them in the world because their personality tends to be more sensitive. They are feelers, they are intuitive. It's not the typical male stereotype. So they might suffer a lot of teasing, bullying, feeling like they are too feminine, they don't fit in. And this can make it hard for them to feel supported in the world. And this can also lead to them ending up in abusive relationships because they may not see their worth. They may just be looking for love. And if they think someone's going to give them that, they might go right into a relationship with them. And it doesn't turn out the way they thought it would. And I believe like soft-spoken, gentle people like Johnny Depp and other male INFPs can be targets for a certain kind of other personalities, people with narcissistic traits, people who are more dramatic, looking for love, but them not being healthy, and seeing someone they can latch onto and use. So that's something that can happen as well. I hope this enlightened you a little bit on how INFPs can end up in abusive relationships, why they stay. Johnny Depp himself connected his experience in the past to his present ones. So like he already knows that like his connections with his parents, with his mom, their divorce has been linked to how things turned out between him and Amber Heard. I hope things go well with the trial. I will definitely be watching when it comes back. So I hope you were enlightened by this video. Please watch my other videos or subscribe if you're interested in learning more. I wish you well, and I will see you next time. Bye.